Happy New Year, Lions fans! May 2025 bring fewer empty promises and more real answers on the field. We've suffered, we've waited, we've believed against all odds, and we're still here. Being a Lions fan means never walking away. It means demanding more. It means loving this team the hardest way possible. May this new year be about growth, smart decisions, and pride in wearing this jersey. We move forward together, always. Happy New Year, Detroit Lions Nation. Everything about this final week comes down to one uncomfortable reality that Lions fans have been forced to sit with. This game does not change the standings. It does not bring the playoffs back, and it does not rewrite what this season became. Detroit enters Week 18 at 8-8, already eliminated, walking into Soldier Field not with postseason stakes, but with pride, emotion, and unresolved questions hanging over the roster. And that is exactly why this game matters more than some people want to admit. Inside the building, this has been treated less like a throwaway finale and more like a final evaluation, almost a preseason game with real consequences for how this group views itself going into the offseason. The conversation all week has been about effort, motivation, and whether the Lions would truly put their bodies on the line in a game that, on paper, means nothing. But the reality is, many of the key veterans want to be out there. Jared Goff is playing after taking a beating the previous week, despite criticism and frustration surrounding his performance. Amon-Ra St. Brown is pushing through a sore knee because sitting out simply is not who he is. Taylor Decker is expected to play while openly acknowledging that this could be his final game, which alone adds a heavy emotional layer to the afternoon. This is not a roster mailing it in. This is a locker room trying to finish something the right way, even if the bigger goal is already gone. From a football standpoint, the Lions know exactly where things have unraveled. The run game, once the backbone of this offense, has gone quiet. Jahmyr Gibbs has been bottled up for weeks, including a stretch where he managed just 2 yards on 7 carries in a recent game. That is not a fluke. It is a trend. Without the ability to run the ball, the entire offense loses its identity. Play action disappears, defenses tee off on Goff, and the offense becomes predictable. It does not matter who is calling plays or what the scheme looks like if Detroit cannot impose itself on the ground. That is why David Montgomery looms large in this matchup. There is emotion there too. He is returning to Chicago, facing his former team, and doing so amid visible frustration about his role that has spilled into cryptic social media posts. For the Lions, this game presents an opportunity to see if they can still lean on him in a physical environment, late in the season, in cold weather, against a division rival. If Detroit wants to leave this season with something tangible to build on, reestablishing that physical run identity matters. Defensively, the Lions are shorthanded in ways that cannot be ignored. Brian Branch and Kirby Joseph, two of the most important pieces in the secondary, are done for the year. That has changed how this defense functions, especially against the run and over the middle. The unit has spent far too much time on the field lately, largely because the offense has not sustained drives. When that happens, even solid defensive performances begin to crack. Against Minnesota, for example, the defense actually limited Justin Jefferson to 4 catches for 30 yards, but turnovers and short fields skewed everything. Context matters, and this defense has been asked to survive without its safety net. There is also the emotional element surrounding familiar faces. C.J. Gardner-Johnson remains a lightning rod, both for his play and his personality. He has been productive, but his intensity always walks a fine line. In a game like this, where emotions can swing quickly if things get lopsided, discipline becomes just as important as talent. The Lions want to walk out of Soldier Field healthy, not dealing with unnecessary penalties or post-whistle chaos. On the other side, Chicago is playing for seeding, which only sharpens the contrast. The Bears want this game for very real reasons, and Detroit knows it. That dynamic alone creates an environment where the Lions must decide who they are. Are they a team that folds when the stakes disappear, or one that competes because that is the standard they claim to live by? Dan Campbell has been clear that he expects his players to fight, and based on who is suiting up, the locker room seems aligned with that message.
This game, then, becomes less about the final score and more about answers. Can the Lions protect Goff well enough without collapsing if the run game stalls? Can they finally get off the field on third down, something that has plagued them for weeks? Can they show that their culture holds even when the reward is nothing more than pride and momentum heading into an uncertain offseason? As this first part comes to a close, the biggest question facing this team is simple but uncomfortable. When everything tangible is already gone, what does this group still play for, and what does that say about the future of the Detroit Lions? What do you think this game truly represents for this team right now? What follows from that question is where this game truly becomes revealing, because once the ball is kicked off, all the talking about pride and culture has to show up between the lines. This is where the Lions either validate what they've been selling for years or quietly expose cracks that no slogan can hide. Playing hard in Week 18 when nothing is on the line sounds easy in theory, but it is one of the hardest things to fake in the NFL. Effort shows up in the run fits, in pass protection, in whether receivers block downfield, and in whether defenders rally to the ball when they are already tired of a long season. For Jared Goff, this is about response. The previous game was brutal, not just statistically but visually. Pressure came early, the pocket collapsed, and his confidence clearly took a hit. This matchup gives him a chance to answer two criticisms at once: the idea that he struggles outside in cold weather and the notion that when things go sideways, he cannot elevate the offense. The Lions insist they believe in him, and Dan Campbell made that crystal clear publicly. Now comes the part where belief has to be backed up by execution. That means quicker decisions, better ball security, and leading an offense that cannot afford early mistakes. If Detroit falls behind quickly, the entire tone of this game changes, and suddenly the idea of just playing for pride becomes a lot harder to sustain. Up front, the offensive line carries enormous weight in this evaluation. Taylor Decker's situation alone puts a spotlight on the group. If this really is his last game, how do the Lions perform around him? Do they give him a performance that reflects how important he has been to this rebuild, or does the line continue to look disjointed and overpowered as it has at times late in the year? Penei Sewell battling through an ankle injury adds another layer. The Lions need to see if this core can still impose its will when conditions are ugly and motivation is internal rather than external. Defensively, the challenge is even more psychological. Caleb Williams has been playing with confidence, extending plays, converting third downs, and punishing defenses that cannot get off the field. The Lions have struggled mightily in that exact area. Third and long has not felt safe. Fourth downs have been demoralizing. If Detroit cannot change that script here, it reinforces a troubling trend that carried through the second half of the season. Missing key players in the secondary is part of the explanation, but not all of it. Communication, tackling, and situational awareness are non-negotiable, regardless of who is injured. The linebacker situation, particularly if Alex Anzalone cannot go, becomes critical against the Bears' offense that has leaned heavily on tight ends. That is where discipline and preparation show up. This is not about flashy plays or turnovers. It is about being sound. A blown assignment in a meaningless game still counts when coaches sit down and decide who fits into next year's plans. And then there is the undercurrent of rivalry and resentment. Ben Johnson on the opposite sideline adds fuel, whether people want to admit it or not. The Lions swept the Bears earlier, and they know a second win would sting. But the danger is letting that personal element override the bigger picture. Detroit does not need trick plays or ego-driven moments. They need confirmation that their identity holds up when emotions run hot. That is why this game feels less like a finale and more like a checkpoint. The Lions are not auditioning for the playoffs. They are auditioning for trust. Trust from the coaching staff, trust from the front office, and trust from the fan base that this season, as disappointing as it became, did not derail the foundation entirely. A sloppy, undisciplined performance would raise uncomfortable questions. A competitive, physical showing, even in a loss, would at least suggest that the culture remains intact. When the final whistle blows, the record will say either 8-9 or 9-8. Neither changes the past. What matters is whether Lions fans walk away feeling like this team still knows who it is, or whether this game confirms fears that the edge has dulled and hard decisions are coming fast. What also cannot be ignored is how this game feeds directly into the uncomfortable off-season conversations that are already happening behind closed doors. This is the last live sample coaches and executives will have before decisions shift from theory to action. Every snap becomes evidence. Every missed tackle, every blown protection, every hesitation on third down is being logged, not emotionally, but clinically. The Lions are not just evaluating talent here, they are evaluating dependability. Who can be trusted when circumstances are no longer ideal? Who competes the same way when the stadium is cold, the season is over, and the reward is nothing more than respect inside the building? That is especially true for the defense. Late in the year, the unit has shown flashes of resilience mixed with stretches of exhaustion. Time of possession has been a quiet killer. When the offense cannot sustain drives, the defense is forced to defend short fields, absorb momentum swings, and eventually break. That does not excuse missed assignments or poor tackling, but it does explain why discipline tends to erode late in games. This matchup is another stress test. If the Lions can string together stops, force punts, and limit extended drives, it sends a message that the structure still works even when star pieces are missing. The secondary, depleted as it is, must survive on communication and positioning rather than athletic margin. Without Brian Branch and Kirby Joseph, mistakes become louder and more costly. There is no safety net. This is where players either show growth or expose limitations. Coaches will remember who stayed composed and who unraveled when tested repeatedly. Offensively, the question of balance is unavoidable. The Lions cannot become one-dimensional again and expect different results. If the run game stalls early, do they stay patient, or do they abandon it and spiral into predictable dropbacks? This is not about winning the play-calling battle. It is about reinforcing identity. For years, this team has preached physicality. That philosophy has to survive adversity, not just ideal conditions. And looming over all of it is the emotional fatigue of a season that promised more. Players feel it. Fans feel it. Everyone remembers how this year started and where expectations were set. That weight does not disappear just because the playoffs are no longer in reach. In some ways, it becomes heavier. That is why how the Lions carry themselves here matters so much. Body language, sideline energy, response to adversity. These details may not show up in the box score, but they shape narratives inside the organization. This is also a moment of accountability for leadership. Veterans set the tone in games like this. Younger players follow. If the effort dips, it reflects upward, not downward. That is why figures like Goff, Decker, St. Brown, and Montgomery matter so much in this environment. Their presence is not symbolic. It is directive. They are telling the locker room, without words, that this still counts. When this game ends, the offseason will arrive immediately. There will be no buffer, no playoff run to delay hard truths. That is why this performance lingers longer than most Week 18 games ever do. It becomes the final impression, the image frozen in everyone's mind when January meetings begin. So as you watch this unfold, don't just watch the score. Watch the reactions. Watch the details. Watch who leans in and who fades out when things get difficult. Because this game is quietly answering questions that will define the next chapter of Lions football. And even beyond the individual evaluations, this game quietly tests the credibility of everything the organization has preached over the last few seasons. Culture is easy to sell when momentum is on your side. It is much harder to prove when disappointment sets in. This is where slogans either become empty noise or reveal that they are deeply ingrained. The Lions have talked for years about being a team that bites, that fights, that never checks out. Week 18, with nothing tangible on the line, is where that claim is either validated or exposed. There is also a strategic layer to all of this that fans rarely get to see in real time. Coaches are watching how players respond to adjustments mid-game. Do they execute corrections, or do the same mistakes keep showing up? That matters immensely heading into an offseason where roles are reshaped. Fringe starters, rotational defenders, depth offensive linemen, and situational contributors are all auditioning, whether they like it or not. A clean game here can quietly extend a career in Detroit. A sloppy one can do the opposite. For the younger players, this environment is a lesson. This is what the NFL looks like when expectations are unmet and there is nowhere to hide. How they handle it now often determines how they handle bigger moments later. Do they press? Do they stay composed? Do they continue to play within the structure of the defense and offense? Or do they freelance trying to make a name for themselves? Coaches notice all of it. And for the fan base, this game serves as a reality check. It forces an honest conversation about where this team actually is. Not where we hoped it would be, not where it briefly looked like it might be, but where it stands today. There's a difference between a disappointing season that still feels structurally sound and one that feels like it is slipping. This performance will shape that perception more than any press conference or off-season promise ever could. That is why the Lions cannot afford a flat effort. A loss is survivable. A lack of competitiveness is not. Fans will accept growing pains, injuries, and even miscalculations. What they will not accept is apathy. This game is the final chance for this roster to show that, even when the outcome no longer benefits them directly, the standard still matters. Once the clock hits 0, everything resets. Contracts will be analyzed. Coaching staffs will be scrutinized. Depth charts will be questioned. But the tone of all those discussions will be influenced by what happens here. That is the weight of this moment, even if the standings say otherwise. So watch closely. This is not just the end of a season. It is a mirror being held up to the Detroit Lions, reflecting exactly who they are right now. There's also one last layer to this that often gets overlooked, and that is how this game reshapes trust between the team and the fans. Detroit supporters are not casual observers. They have lived through rebuilds, false starts, and brief flashes of hope that disappeared just as quickly. What they look for now is honesty in performance. They can tell when a team is truly competing and when it is simply going through the motions. This finale becomes a referendum on whether the Lions still deserve the benefit of the doubt heading into another pivotal offseason. Every drive carries subtext. A stalled possession is not just a punt, it is another reminder of an offense that struggled to finish consistently down the stretch. A missed tackle is not just a missed tackle, it is part of a pattern that showed up at the worst possible moments this year. At the same time, a sustained drive, a physical run, a third down stop, those moments resonate more than usual because fans are looking for proof that this season's disappointment did not completely erode the foundation. The coaching staff feels this too. This is the final live chance to show that adjustments are being made, that lessons were learned from late-season collapses, and that stubborn tendencies are not going to define the future. Even subtle decisions, like when to be aggressive and when to be conservative, are being judged through a wider lens. This is not just about beating Chicago. It is about showing that the process is still moving forward, even when the results no longer rewarded immediately. And when the game ends, the silence that follows will be telling. No playoff countdown. No next week matchup to preview. Just reflection. That is when the real conversations begin, both inside Allen Park and among the fan base. Who stays? Who goes? What must change? And what, if anything, should remain untouched? This is why Week 18 matters more than it should. It is the last impression before months of speculation, debate, and anticipation take over. It is the final image fans will carry into the offseason, replayed over and over until training camp arrives. So as this chapter closes, the Lions are not asking to be praised. They are asking to be believed. And belief is earned, not claimed. And the final thing to understand is that this game is not about convincing outsiders. National narratives will move on quickly. Analysts will glance at the final score, shrug, and file Detroit away as a non-playoff team that failed to meet expectations. That noise does not matter. What matters is what this game confirms internally and emotionally for everyone who has been invested in this season from the inside out. For the front